Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Wildfires, heat domes, atmospheric rivers, a poison drug supply, and of course, a global pandemic. These are not ordinary times.
BC's Premier urges patience as the province's mayors demand help with housing, healthcare, and climate change. Also,
it was disturbing. It's something that you don't sign up for. Certainly my wife and kids didn't sign up for that.
threats to politicians and even their families. BC's elected officials speak out on growing harassment and...
Larry's story needs to be amplified, and rightfully so. He deserves to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Vernon's Larry Kwong, the first non-white player to skate in the NHL. The push to have him inducted into hockey's Hall of Fame.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung. Thanks for joining us. Premier John Horgan gave his final speech at the Union of BC Municipalities Convention in Whistler. While he didn't make any new promises, Horgan urged local leaders to work with all levels of government to deal with housing, public safety, and healthcare. Mira Baines has more from Whistler.
Thank you.
From funny to fiery, Premier John Horgan made his last speech to the province's local government leaders. He addressed recent climate disasters, including wildfires, the heat dome, and atmospheric rivers that cut off or destroyed communities.
This has kind of felt like a 1970s disaster movie. Towering Inferno meets the Andromeda Strain or something like that.
Horgan stressed collaboration between different levels of government to deal with housing, public safety, and healthcare, but made no promises.
Instead of coming to UBCM and saying something for you, something for you, something for you, we've come to say, what can we do over the next year together?
His speech garnered a standing ovation. It's unclear who will take his place next year, but with regards to the race, there is some controversy. Vancouver Point Grey MLA David Eby is facing climate activist Anjali Appadurai. The BC NDP is investigating allegations involving membership sign-ups and allegations around support for Appadurai's campaign from an environmental group. Elections BC is also investigating.
I'm concerned, seriously concerned about the integrity of the process.
Still, he spoke warmly about Indigenous groups, but bashed protesters critical of the province's old growth strategy.
Have you ever met an Indigenous person? Some do-gooder comes in with a tilly hat and says, you're all bad people. And to the critics, I say, put your name on a ballot and see how much support you have.
A fiery last speech from a premier who's known for speaking his mind. Mira Baines, CBC News, Whistler.
Premier Horgan, just one of the many public officials from all levels of government who say they are facing a rise in harassment, and it's leading some to choose to leave office altogether. As Joel Ballard explains, in some cases, the harassment has turned criminal.
When Brad West entered public office, he expected a certain level of criticism, but he says that criticism crossed a line. A man upset with the bylaw issue became so enraged, West says he threatened the mayor, his wife, and 2 young children.
My son is 5 years old. My other son is 15 months old. They have nothing to do with anything that ever might be going on in the city.
The man was arrested and the prosecution service says he was charged.
There is nothing in this world more important to me than my wife and my 2 young boys. And my first responsibility is to love and protect them. And so I took that really seriously.
His experience is one example of the growing harassment facing elected officials. In Squamish, the outgoing mayor says she was the target of a well-funded social media harassment campaign. She says it spread misinformation and even implicated her family.
It's been a really difficult time for a small community.
And she's had people scream in her face. She says it's had a chilling effect on potential leaders.
I asked a number of women over the last 18 months to consider running for council or running for mayor. And the answer I got was, look what's happening to you. Why would I do that?
The issue also present at the provincial level. The leader of the Green Party says her constituency office was once flooded by an aggressive group demanding to see the leader.
There really should not be a tolerance for bullying, harassment, intimidation of elected officials or media. We need a system in which people can be assured that they're safe doing their work.
And of course, BC's most visible politician and his family have been the target of their fair share of vitriol. Horgan admits the harassment is forcing some to leave office.
And for those who are leaving because of that contempt, I hope they'll reflect instead on the countless number of people who are just getting on with their lives and saying, I'm glad you're doing that because someone has to.
And all of these politicians agree the harassment needs to be addressed and not simply accepted as part of the job. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Port Coquitlam.
A person is recovering in hospital after a random stabbing in Victoria last night. Police say the victim was sitting on a bench in the downtown area around 9:30 when they were confronted by a stranger. The victim was stabbed several times but managed to flee the area. A few hours later, another man was arrested after attacking an investigating officer with a skateboard. Police are still investigating as to whether the two incidents were related. A Toronto-based waste management company is facing massive fines after one of its BC workers was exposed to asbestos without proper protective gear. GFL Environmental has been ordered by WorkSafe BC to pay just over $710,000. It's the single largest penalty ever handed out by the agency. The high-risk violation was discovered when WorkSafe was sent to inspect a fire-damaged building in Kimberley, assumed to be contaminated with asbestos. During the inspection, a worker was seen removing debris without wearing proper PPE. Asbestos exposure was a contributing factor in 53 related deaths in BC last year. A therapeutic horse riding program that has operated out of the Mid-Island for 30 years has closed. ETRA provided horse therapy for people living with disabilities and mobility issues. For 3 decades, the program helped thousands of clients gain strength and confidence on the backs of these patient horses. But after struggling to find a certified instructor and a 2-year hiatus due to the pandemic, the association never found its feet again.
See the connection between the horses and the clients. That's something that we can facilitate and support, but we can't do that. Horses seem to know. Amazing program. Very sad to see it go.
The organization is donating its remaining funds to fellow nonprofits advancing the lives of people with disabilities and animal welfare in this community. The mystery of dozens of severed bear paws found on a remote road over a year ago has been solved. The BC Conservation Officer Service says a taxidermist was responsible. A warning, some of these images may be disturbing. More than 80 adult and bear cub paws were found scattered by a distressed passerby in the North Shuswap area. The service says the paws inadvertently fell out of the taxidermist's truck and were not related to black market bear trafficking. That person was in legal possession of the wildlife parts, but was facing a fine for unlawful dumping. The Conservation Service says the taxidermist was instead allowed to make a donation to a local stewardship guardian program. The BC SPCA is asking residents of Surrey and Cloverdale to keep an eye out for a goat that escaped the adoption centre. Houdini the goat was brought in as a stray to the BC SPCA, and this is video of him before making the big escape, and he's now believed to be running at large. He was last spotted at 168th and 50th in Surrey. Staff say if you do see Houdini, do not chase him because he's small and very fast. Instead, you're asked to try guiding him into an enclosed area where he can be contained and picked up by staff. 74 years ago, Larry Kwong, who was Chinese, broke the color barrier in the NHL when he suited up for the New York Rangers. Kwong grew up in Vernon and fought racial barriers and discrimination to make it to the highest level of hockey. Now, as Brady Strachan reports, a group of fans is pushing to have him inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame.
There he is with his midget team. That's from 1939 when he was 15 years old.
Chad soon shows off a modest display dedicated to Larry Kwong at this hockey rink in Vernon. Kwong was the first hockey player from the Okanagan to make it to the NHL. It's a story Soon has been championing since he met and befriended Kwong more than a decade ago.
So it's just a really powerful story. It has, it has all the elements of that classic hero journey. It's just, the impossible odds.
Larry Kwong was born in 1923 in Vernon into a Chinese immigrant family. His parents ran a dry goods store. And like many boys, Kwong played hockey and dreamed of making it to the NHL. Fast and tenacious, he was a talented center, leading his minor hockey team to a provincial title.
He was a sniper, he was a brilliant passer. He would set up behind the net like Gretzky would 30 years later and make extraordinary passes.
Kwong's play caught the eye of a scout for the New York Rangers, and in 1948, as the leading scorer of his minor league team, Kwong was called up to the NHL.
End of the second, Montreal 8, New York 2.
Kwong sat on the bench until late in the third period when his coach put him out for one shift. But with that 60 seconds, he became the first non-white player to skate in the NHL. Kwong's NHL career was short-lived, however, as the Rangers sent him back to the minors shortly after the game.
Larry left the team knowing that that the league just wasn't ready for him, for a player that looked like him. It was, hockey had long been known as a white man's game, and Larry just didn't fit the image of that.
Now soon is part of a push to have Kwong inducted into the 2023 class of the Hockey Hall of Fame as a builder for breaking racial barriers and also growing hockey in Europe, where Kwong coached and played for more than a decade. Kwong died in 2018 in Calgary when he was 94, little recognized for his achievement.
Larry's story needs to be amplified, and rightfully so. He deserves to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
We're also going to do some turning today.
Moisin Hasham works with immigrant children, giving them opportunities to play hockey. He says having role models like Kwong recognize at the highest levels is important to diversify the sport and make hockey something all Canadian kids can see themselves playing.
We want them to understand that there are people that look like them that did play the game at the highest levels.
Soon and Hasham hope the timing is right for this bid to the Hockey Hall of Fame, as next year marks 75 years since Larry Kwong made hockey history.
Keep smiling.
Brady Strachan, CBC News, Vernon.
Oh, I love that story, Joe. I got goosebumps as I was listening to it. Yeah, Brady did such a great job with it, and I think we'll be following that one closely, an inspiration for someone who's Chinese herself. So very cool.
I'm sure. Yeah, and I'd never heard of that story at all. So I'm really glad Brady shared that. Yeah, we better keep on it. I hope that development happens quickly. We are not quite into hockey season, are we?
No, not quite. It's kind of nice
starting to
still.
feel, it's still very summer-like, and it is officially summer. Take a look at the temperatures across southern BC, where it is still seasonal, even though temperatures dropped behind that cold front. We're a little chillier at YVR than seasonal, but hanging on to the high teens in the interior. So that cold front did bring a freshness, but we are by no means done with summer yet. Check out the last 6 hours. You can see those showers that moved across Metro Vancouver this morning, clearing out this afternoon. Lovely to see that sunshine with those crisp northwesterly winds. But there is a new system moving in behind. Not expected to see a lot of rain, maybe a few showers tomorrow morning, but you can see it on the satellite and radar. This is going to bring increasing clouds for your Saturday. So it's a fresh, cloudy start to your weekend. It'll actually feel quite nice before quite the reversal in the weather for Sunday. So Lien, we sort of get two seasons packed into one weekend. I'll tell you just how warm we're talking. We're not done yet. Coming up.
Okay, sounds good. We're going to have a variety of wardrobe options this weekend.
We'll need all of it. That's right.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
A judge has ruled that the names of some candidates may appear in non-Latin letters on the ballot for the upcoming civic election. But some critics feel it's an attempt to capture more votes. Vancouver's chief election officer submitted the application to the provincial court, asking the judge to declare that 15 candidates in October's election cannot have their names on the ballot using Chinese, Persian, or other non-Latin characters. Instead, they can only use their, quote, usual names.
I was born with a Chinese name. It is a usual name that I use, and I was very shocked to find out that this would have been challenged. And although the decision means that I will be able to go ahead and use my name on the ballot, it also sort of still is unanswered because this case is going to continue and go forward. And I believe that we do need a resolution to this.
Many of the respondents pushed back, saying their non-English names are a part of who they are, as you heard there. Judge James Wingham has adjourned the case until after the election. Taking a look beyond Vancouver, voters go to the polls in civic elections in towns and cities everywhere in BC on October 15th. Ahead of that, our municipal affairs reporter Justin McElroy sat down with 5 first-time female city councillors. They were elected in 2018, each one in a different city. All but one is running for re-election next month. Here's a part of that conversation.
Hi, I'm CBC Vancouver's municipal affairs reporter Justin McElroy. Welcome to our political roundtable. 5 councillors from 5 different cities join us now. Each is seeking re-election. My job will be mostly to get out of the way and listen to the 5 of you.
Our communities are facing huge challenges, from climate change to the poison drug crisis to the housing crisis and beyond, are more than we can tackle on our own as local governments, but we have a responsibility to step up and do as much as we can.
Municipalities have a key role to play with addressing the climate crisis, and that people will tell us that it's out of our jurisdiction, but we know that climate policy is housing policy, it's transportation policy, it's public space policy. And so if we build our cities through a climate lens, we'll actually build better cities for everybody.
Climate change isn't a distant future problem. As we've seen and local governments have felt so clearly, it is impacting our residents and it's impacting our infrastructure. So I think it's really disingenuous for local politicians to suggest that somehow these aren't our responsibilities.
People died in each of our communities in the heat dome, and that wasn't because it was too hot outside, it was because it was too hot inside. So we said, what do we need to do to keep people safe and alive? And we recognized that we did not have the tools at a local level to implement the building policies that we need. So what do? We collectively lobby to the province, and we collectively lobby, and we're a lot stronger together saying, this is what we need to keep people alive in our communities.
There's so much that you want to do so fast, and we can't always do it as fast as we would like. It's important to have that support network that's out there saying, you can do it, here's how you can do it, I can support you with policy, I can support you with information, and being able to amplify each other's voices.
New Westminster has a long colonial history that we still celebrate, which is very interesting. And so, like Port Moody, we have thoroughly displaced people, the people whose lands we're on. So the work of reconciliation and relationship building is difficult, and it takes time. And at the same time, what we can move on is decolonization. So that is unlearning some of the things that we understand about the history of our land. And that includes issues like climate justice, how we address climate issues.
When you hear from young women saying, I'm interested in getting into politics, what do you say?
I think the really important piece about that question is ensuring that we are encouraging folks who are not represented to run, but also making the supports to allow them to thrive in these roles. It is a difficult job, and we have informal networks, but there should be more formal support. There should be more systemic support to keep people in office, to elect people to office who haven't been represented, and make sure that the voices of everyone in the community is actually thoroughly represented.
And that was our Justin McElroy hosting a roundtable discussion with 5 first-time female city councillors from Metro Vancouver. A longer version of that conversation will be available on demand in the days to come. It's an industry with roots founded in Eastern cultures. So why is it that for many BIPOC community, they feel excluded in the wellness industry? That's next. And thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. A Syrian family has been reunited in Canada after many years of painful separation. Some members arrived in New Brunswick in 2016, but others had to remain in a Jordan refugee camp. Jeannie Armstrong has more.
When was the last time you saw your sister and her family?
Like in 2016, yeah. When I moved from Jordan to here, yeah, that was the last time.
When you got the phone call that they got a ticket, they were coming to Canada, did you think it was real?
To be honest, no, because they had like 3 times for their flight, the cancellation after that. This time I make sure when they arrived from Jordan to Cairo. That was the real one.
That was the moment you felt they were coming?
Yeah.
What were you telling them about Fredericton and to get them excited?
You know, Fredericton is a good place for the family. Here, it's like, I always tell my friend, it's the greeny province here in New Brunswick. You know, it's everything green here. It's nice people. There is no crime, no drugs, and there is a lot of nice people in here. When I came to here, there was no Arabic community in Fredericton. But now they have a lot of Arabic community in Fredericton. I'm gonna help them. I'm gonna, you know, it's gonna be easy for them.
I'm so happy they're here. I'm so happy for Abdul Manim. I'm so happy for his family. It was so hard. So many things kept happening that made it so hard for the family. And I just feel today I'm just starting over to celebrate. Like I'm going to forget about all the troubles, the difficulties in the last 4.5 years, and we're just going to celebrate and start their new life here in Canada. What are you most excited to show them about Fredericton? Oh, the river, the parks,
exactly. Yeah.
It's so beautiful, and it's you know, the fresh air. They've been in a refugee camp, you know, a tin hut there with thousands of other people side by side. And now they have an apartment with electricity, they'll have Wi-Fi, they have their brother and their sister and the children. They'll just start a whole new life.
Yeah.
They'll be free.
Welcome back. What is white wellness, and why are people of color excluded in the wellness industry? Those are some of the questions a Vancouver filmmaker is tackling in her new documentary. Suman Kendola's Identity of Wellness looks at the impact of colonization and capitalism on the wellness industry. It was just released today on CBC Gem. Here's your preview of it.
From internet gurus to boutique studios, the wellness industry is booming. The billion-dollar industry is growing at a historical rate, making wellness even more accessible. So, why does it feel like it's not made for me? Like, I'm not the image of what wellness looks like.
A standard studio can say, hey, we welcome everybody, all bodies here. Look at our marketing material. We have all walks of life come to our class. And then you walk into the class and you're actually the only person of color.
I was probably the only different person in most events, and that made people uncomfortable.
When I go buy my gear, all the outdoors retail stores didn't have any form of media advertisement that showed a Black woman, you know, hiking or backpacking or doing all these really cool things. It's always white people.
White wellness is wellness created by white people for white people in a westernized context with only white people in mind. It's clear that white wellness is a thing, and it's impacted how people feel in these spaces and how people operate their businesses. So how did white wellness become what it is today?
Capitalism and the values of it take things and box them up and compartmentalize it and sell the parts that are going to sell.
I was taught that yoga was given as a gift to the West by Indian gurus.
Then I go into my yoga class and it's all about like crunches and like sweating it out.
And what I'm learning is that's not the whole truth.
When I really thought about it, I only like going there because on days when I'm really busy and I know it's gonna be 45 minutes, I'm gonna get a killer workout and I'm gonna get out of there.
I feel like a lot of the time it's actually promoted as like weight loss, right? Hot yoga, it has so much to do with fitness.
Am I skinny enough to be here? Am I blonde enough? Am I this enough? You know what I mean? And I just think that we've created this poster child of what this woman looks like.
Knowing about how toxic and how conflicted our relationship with our bodies can be.
Look at the sheer amount of universal trauma that we've been through. There's also been this bubbling up, not like we're discovering, but things are being uncovered about the social climate that we're currently in.
Most people come in, they're thinking there's gonna be a lot of aggressive guys in the gym and it's gonna be like total, like, whoa, like overwhelming feeling.
This was a way to fight and not go to jail.
Challenges come and then they go. Emotions come and then they go.
I had to go and look at myself. I had to go and look at everything that I was doing.
I show up to every practice, and when I'm in these spaces, I can feel all of this emotion bubbling up within me.
I remember one time I was in Value Village, and this woman was staring at me, old white woman, probably in her 70s. She was staring at me, and I got so angry because I thought she was thinking I was stealing or something. And I was like, why is this lady staring at me?
And by shoving it down, it makes me feel so mad for being myself, for being a woman of color, for not being this image of wellness that I just see everywhere.
Your color is something that is more out here than in here. All of the things about race and culture and color were things that society built into us that come out here, and they're the more on the periphery.
And then after a couple minutes, she actually came up to me and then she like tapped me on the shoulder and she's like, sir, I just think you're like one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen in my life.
But then it gets to a point where you're like, how do I unravel all of this trauma and how do I let it go? And also realizing that that trauma doesn't define you.
It all comes down to letting go.
And to talk more about the film, I have the woman behind all of it here in studio with me, Suman Kentola, the filmmaker. So, Suman, tell me, why did you decide to make this film? What motivated you?
Yeah, what motivated me was I feel like I was having all of these different moments in my life where I was starting to get very curious about this industry. I've been an active participant probably since I was 13, but recently I had gotten in a car accident and I was learning a lot about like somatic healing and what are the actual roots of yoga and how do we actually use these practices. And it made me realize that I was like, I've been doing it wrong for so long. And I was always curious of like, why does it feel so uncomfortable in some of these spaces? And I also had just recently launched a product in the industry. So now I was going from the participant lens to the creator lens. And I was like, oh, like starting to recognize a lot of things that I hadn't seen before. And so, yeah, that curiosity essentially drove it.
Right, and you shared some of your personal experience throughout the film, but at the same time, you interviewed a lot of people as well. You talked to industry professionals. What stood out to you as you were speaking to them?
What stood out to me was that I think when I first had this question and I was very curious about like why are spaces created this way, you always have the fear of like, is this a me thing? Is this something maybe I'm just thinking and feeling? Maybe my friends and I are just feeling these things. But as I was talking to people, as I was exploring with them, I'm like, no, this is like something that's very prevalent. And there are people out there in industries that have created a lot of solutions and a lot more space for people to feel welcomed and seen and thought of.
And so as, you know, all of us sit down to watch the film, which is on GEM and also debuting this weekend on CBC television, what do you want us to take away from it?
I want you guys to take away, one, what is your own experience with wellness and what does it feel like to be in these spaces for yourself? And how can you, either as a teacher, create a more inclusive space, or you as a student, become more curious about the things that you're doing to take care of yourself?
Any quick tips on how to make a space more inclusive?
Yeah, I think that like a quick tip is know what you want out of the space, first of all. Like, what are you actually looking for? Are you looking for something that's going to be like a super good workout? Or are you actually looking for something that's going to be deeply restorative? So knowing how to choose. And then creating that inclusive space is like being mindful of all the different types of people that are walking into this space. What do they look like? What brought them here? What do they feel like? And how can you speak to them and acknowledge them in ways that acknowledges all that?
That's so important to be able to see people for who they are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sumin, for your beautiful film, and good luck with the debut. Thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
He is a royal enthusiast, collecting royal trinkets through the years, and he's amassed quite a treasure trove. But it wasn't until the Queen's death that he realized just what he had. His royal stash revealed next.
For 30 years, a natural gas pipeline to Vancouver Island has been discussed and rejected by the federal and BC governments. Today, though, they finally agreed to build it.
British Columbians deserve some sort of award for endurance and persistence.
The pipeline will run 530 kilometers, starting near Vancouver, ending in Victoria. The federal and provincial governments say it'll not just create hundreds of jobs, but within 2 years, it'll provide inexpensive, clean-burning fuel to thousands of homes and businesses.
Done.
All of this is going to cost about $500 million. The federal and provincial government will each pay $150 million, the rest coming from the private sector. When other pipelines were looked at in the past, studies said they didn't make economic sense. But the government says now conditions have changed.
The cost is less, the market is better from the start, and there are numerous side benefits. Plus the fact that the price of gas in the field is much lower today.
But some resource economists say there hasn't been any public evidence to suggest this pipeline is any different from past proposals, that it still doesn't make economic sense.
If the object is to create employment, we can do it cheaper and better. If the object is to lower the fuel bills of people on Vancouver Island, both residential users and industrial users such as pulp mills, it's cheaper to give them a direct subsidy than to ship the gas.
Today's signing was just agreement in principle. There's still a lot of work to be done before any construction begins on a gas pipeline, not the least of which is making sure there's a market to find out if those tens of thousands of households and businesses are willing to convert to natural gas. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
An extraordinary scene in London today. The lineup of mourners waiting to file past the Queen's coffin stretching 8 kilometers. As the CBC's Chris Brown reports, Canadian soldiers are now preparing to lead the Queen to her final resting place.
Officers! The world is converging on London for the Queen's funeral, including soldiers from Canada and Commonwealth countries. The New Zealanders performed a haka, a ceremonial Maori dance, for the Prince and Princess of Wales at a military training centre near the city. 80 Canadian soldiers are here, representing units the Queen had a special connection to. And they're rehearsing through the night for their roles.
When we turned on to the main stretch and we saw the flags and you saw the palace at the other end, I mean, it got very real for everybody.
She was our queen, she was our sovereign, and for us to lead her to her final resting place, it means so much, and it's such an honor to be here.
Meanwhile, the huge crowds of people hoping to pay their respects to the Queen before the funeral continues to grow. This line, the queue of all queues, continues to move tens of thousands of people through the city to Westminster Hall and ultimately past the Queen's coffin. Entry to the line was temporarily halted earlier today but is now reopened, with organizers telling mourners they can expect waits of up to 24 hours. While some VIPs, such as former UK Prime Minister Theresa May, were allowed to skip the line, other famous Britons, such as soccer star David Beckham, waited with everyone else.
Everyone feels the same, and that's why we all queued up today, because I think it's the right thing to do.
King Charles, meanwhile, visited Wales, where someone gave him a pen as a joke, just in case, they said.
Oh God, I hate it.
A reference to his much publicized frustrations with the official pens that didn't work. He addressed the Parliament in Welsh, a language he learned before his investiture as a Prince of Wales in 1969.
I take up my new duties with immense gratitude for the privilege of having been able to serve as Prince of Wales.
By day's end, Charles and his siblings had returned to London for a more somber duty, another vigil at the Queen's side. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
For decades, an Ottawa man has been collecting royal family memorabilia and storing it in his basement. But it wasn't until the Queen died last week that this superfan decided to bring it all out, and then he realized how much he had. CBC's Sana Choi got a royal tour of his massive collection.
So if you want a plate of one of the royal members, I have it. If you want a mug, I have it. If you want a bell, I have it. I've been collecting royalty memorabilia since 1977, since the Silver Jubilee, and now this is the extent of it.
How many pieces do you think you have?
I have thousands of pieces. Like, this is just a few of the pieces that I have in my collection. I didn't realize how much stuff I had of the Queen, and from the coronation all the way to like all other events in her life, the Golden Jubilee, the Silver Jubilee, the Diamond Jubilee, and I'm waiting for something from the Platinum Jubilee. Don't have anything yet, so.
So do you go out searching for these pieces?
No,
or
they just find me, so. Friends know about this collection. I don't think they realize the extent of the collection, and every time, and mostly part of this collection is from them, because every time they leave or go on a holiday, they bring back a piece of memorabilia for me.
Do you have an estimate as to how much your collection is worth?
I have no idea. I didn't even realize that I had this much stuff until I started taking it out.
What piece means the most to you?
I think the piece that means the most to me is the painting that I commissioned by Corbidi. He's an Ottawa artist. I just asked him, I found out that he was doing portraits and asked him to paint a portrait of the Queen for me. And I just had two stipulations. It had to be the Queen from the 50s, and she had to wear a tiara.
What about their family fascinates you?
It's just their sense of duty, their commitment to their country and to the Commonwealth. And I've seen her in Ottawa so many times, but never personally got to meet her. And actually had the pleasure of joining in the festivities in London in 2012 for the Diamond Jubilee. That was just an incredible time. I was there for the flotilla when the Queen floated down. it's going to be an emotional day, but she had a great life. She's left a great legacy behind. I think she'll be remembered really fondly as a great monarch, so the longest monarch.
And will you continue collecting memorabilia?
I am, yes, and like with the new royals as well.
Taking you now to Ukraine, where the day was taken up with the grim work of exhuming hundreds of bodies. A mass burial site was found near a recently recaptured city. Paul Hunter looks at a horrific discovery and a warning. This report includes disturbing images and details.
The stench is said to have been overwhelming. Workers in hazmat gear digging their way through a mass burial site outside the city of Izum, southeast of Kharkiv, a region until recently held by Russian forces. They found body after body, laying each of them onto clean white bags and sealing them tightly. The count so far is more than 400 graves, with a mix of soldiers, civilians, and children. Some of the dead apparently killed in an airstrike, others, by appearance, tortured. One body has the markings of a rope around the neck, its arms broken. Another has its hands tied behind its back, another with its ears severed. Each of these will be investigated, said the district governor, calling it a genocide of the Ukrainian people. A Ukrainian war crimes prosecutor, also on site today, said forensic experts will determine the facts of what happened and how they were killed, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is already demanding accountability from Vladimir Putin. Russia, he said, is leaving death behind it everywhere and must be held responsible. In a statement, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly called it horrifying. The White House called it repugnant. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said this site and others are being studied closely.
We're all working to build the evidence and document the atrocities that have been committed. And in many instances, these will amount to war crimes.
With more bodies yet to be uncovered, the sobering work continues as wooden crosses stretch into the distance. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Empty streets, masks everywhere, and lineups at grocery stores. The images of the early days of COVID-19 and an exhibit that looks back at that fearful time. That's next. And it's 6:41 p.m. on a gorgeous night on Mount Washington on Vancouver Island. More fall-like weather starting to hit the mountaintops. No doubt that has some skiers already dreaming of snowy slopes. Johanna has her full weekend forecast next.
My name is Matthew Gregono, and we're at Old Town Glassworks in Yellowknife, Old Town. So Yellowknife, right now, it's about minus 28 to 30 below. As far as the next biggest city, Edmonton is about 1,500 kilometers, or if you're driving good and fast, about 17, 18, 19 hours away. Yellowknife has a sort of a smaller community type of mentality. When it comes to waste management, a lot of stuff goes in the landfill, which is what helped to inspire the creation of Old Town Glassworks, where we try to take material out of the waste stream and put it back in the economy. Huge diversity in what you will find in a bottle in Yellowknife, and that the color, size, shape, quality ranges immensely. In the showroom here, we have a whole range from vases, glasses, candle holders, wine glasses, beer tankards, guitar slides, lampshades. So there's a whole range of stuff we can sandblast. It all mainly features using northern images of the forest or the animals or the aurora or a combination of all the above. The hammer that we use is something that I developed. It's actually a piece of fencing wire and an old ball bearing that came out of my Honda Civic CV joints, and I welded the two together. So now we've got the top taken off and we've got a razor sharp surface. So what we need to do is we take it over to our grinder. The grinder is made out of a 1955 Hoover washing machine that's had the agitator removed and a diamond disc installed. And then we put it in the vertical lathe and turn it. And then we use diamond sandpaper to sand the square surface into a rounded surface, and then finer grades of paper to bring it up to a smooth finish. So no one's going to hurt themselves using it. Definitely would not be good. So after we've done the grinding and the polishing, it's to put on the glassware, and then we take it over to the sandblaster. It very rapidly cuts away the glass. There's a spray, is a sandy grit that hits the glass and cuts it away. And that the longer you stay in one spot, the deeper it cuts. You can go from just a light surfaced etch to a sand carving where there's a real tactile sense to it.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change change life? Don't miss 2050 Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
Terrifying images. Office workers fleeing in terror as those flames engulfed a 42-story tower in south-central China. No casualties have been reported, and the cause isn't known, but the thick black smoke and falling debris were clearly a cause for alarm. Thankfully, the fire has been put out now. Extremely heavy rains have caused deadly flash floods in central Italy. 10 people are reported to have been killed, with at least 4 others missing. The water caused extensive damage in several towns, flooding homes and businesses and piling parked cars on top of each other. Rivers breached their banks in some areas, and some farm fields remain under more than a meter of water. Rescue crews saved dozens of people who had climbed trees and taken refuge on rooftops just to escape the rising waters. It's estimated the region received 6 months' worth of rain in just 4 hours. Wow, Joe, it seems like we just hear more and more about extreme events like that nowadays.
You said it, Leanne, and unfortunately, I've got one more to follow things up. I am tracking a superstorm hitting Alaska right now, and unfortunately, coastal flooding is almost a certainty. I want to show you what I'm watching on the satellite and radar. I've put on the enhanced, the IR satellite, just to really show you that swirl. That's actually remnants of a typhoon in the Eastern Pacific a few days ago. It is now the strongest storm ever in September in the Bering Sea, and it is looking to make one of the biggest impacts to Alaska that they've seen in decades. Coastal flooding with storm surge is the biggest concern. Look at all these warnings, everything from hurricane force winds, storm warnings, and it is the storm surge around Nome, Alaska, a population of almost 4,000 people, that we are worried about a storm surge. Get this, tomorrow morning of about 4 meters, 3 to 4 meters above high tide. So that's, almost double my height for coastal areas. So just want to track this through one more time. There's a center of that low sort of stalling out near Nome. I bet you're wondering if this will impact BC. We are not expecting to see that low pressure system slide down across BC. It'll sort of weaken in place. But what it does do is amplify the jet stream. I want to take you through the forecast. We've been talking a lot about the cool day tomorrow before we get back to summer. Here's Monday, and notice that ridge of warm temperatures off the coast. That will be bringing us summer again next week. And I know it is still officially summer. We've got a few more days to go. That's going to bring mid-20-degree temperatures back for most of next week for southern BC. So we're not out of the woods when it comes to fire danger either. And we're really hoping, by the way, that rain we saw in the northeast today that will continue tonight, going to help the battleship fire. That is good rain, 10 to 20 millimeters, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, forecast for tomorrow. Still fall-like, 14 for Williams Lake, 18 for Kelowna, and 19 as we head out towards the Kootenays. Lots of sunshine after morning showers, so heads up, we might see lingering showers across the province. Mainly cloudy day here in Metro Vancouver. Notice that 16, so it is a crisp day with northwesterly winds, but then back up to the low 20s. And this is YVR, Lien, so it's going to feel like the mid-20s, as we said, have all of the outfits, all the seasons just ready to go.
Yes, I love it. And you know what? That's almost like the perfect summer forecast. Love it.
I agree. Yes, let's soak it in.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
The COVID pandemic may not be over, but a museum in Montreal has a new photo exhibit that traces its earliest days. John Nagala toured the show at the McCord Stewart called Here Begins.
Each one of these 30 photographs are sure to evoke stark memories of a dark time in history. They're part of an exhibition recounting the first few moments of the COVID-19 pandemic, taken by photographer Michel Huneau.
It was an honor to receive the mission, the mandate, but it was also very stressful. It was quite a challenge.
So he decided to go out and talk to people to help him find answers. And he asked them one important question: what's on your mind?
What's on your mind allowed me to meet different people from different backgrounds that I didn't know. It was a great reason for a great chat, trying to understand together what's happening.
And through those discussions, Huneau provides a behind-the-scenes look into some of the most heartbreaking but also uplifting moments from the start of the pandemic. What's the scene like here?
This is, I like all the pictures, obviously, but this is one of my favorite personal moments. It's a woman of 93 years old called Freda that I met in the Maimonides Geriatric Center.
Freda was put in an at-risk zone at the time because she tested positive for COVID, but after a while she was free of it and got to leave the hot zone by herself.
It's one of those images that really complement our own experiences and tell us why we did all these efforts in the first place.
It brings back those initial feelings of uncertainty, of sadness, of loss.
Zoe Toussignan says the exhibition is an emotional experience, but was necessary for the museum to document.
They wanted to really have visual photographic evidence of those changes as they were occurring in Montreal and specifically.
Toussignan says the museum wants to continue reflecting people's lived experiences.
It means that as a photography collection and as an institution, we're playing an active role in people's lives in the city.
The exhibition will be open to the public until January 2023. John Ngala, CBC News, Montreal.
The small town of New Denmark in New Brunswick has an even smaller version of itself, each building recreated in miniature form. The 100-year-old creator and his curious hobby, that's next.
I haven't really felt very safe to drink it just because I don't know exactly what's going on.
This New Brunswick trailer park has been under a boil water advisory since April.
So I bought a huge water machine, the 18-liter jugs. So, I mean, I go through one probably every week. If you're cooking, if you're cleaning, you can't brush your teeth either. But washing vegetables, it's the same thing. It's just very awkward and uncomfortable.
Silver Meadows is home to more than 87 sites for mobile homes. The land is privately owned, with residents paying a monthly fee for services, including well water, but it currently needs to be boiled for at least 1 minute.
just don't know what's going on. We just don't know when it's going to be fixed or what actually is going on.
The park's Toronto-based owner won't say what the problem is or when the water will be safe to drink.
I've contacted the company, I've tried contacting the park managers, and it seems like we're not really getting straight responses. If we have gotten answers, it's like nothing is matching up, like we're getting different stories. So we're just very confused and concerned, and we want answers at this point.
You have to boil every bit of water you use unless you're bathing in cold water.
This resident says he's been calling and emailing his park manager, elected officials, and the Department of Health, and getting no answers.
After 30 years being a tenant, why wouldn't I know what's in my water? They have not offered to give us any water, any decrease of rent, boiled water for dishes, cooking and so on, and drinking water we buy.
The New Brunswick Department of Health says it's aware of the issue and in contact with the park's owner. It will evaluate when the boil water order can be lifted.
It's not acceptable that people should be having to do this.
I'm Belle Perry. Join Anita Bath and me as we host Situation Critical, a special virtual town hall addressing healthcare. Tune in September 20th on all CBC platforms.
Well, a New Brunswick man has been making tiny replicas of houses and structures from around his town of New Denmark. It started as a little hobby 12 years ago when Gunnar Peterson was 88 years young. This month, he turned 100, and his love for his hometown keeps on growing. Shane Fowler has the story.
There are several landmark buildings in the small community of New Denmark, and for each one, there's a tiny version of it. There's a whole recreation of New Denmark sitting on a farmhouse porch. This is the small town that Gunnar Peterson built.
I started with smaller things like sleds for horses and stuff like that.
It started when the retired farmer put together a miniature depiction of how lumberjacks harvest timber and cleared the land when New Denmark was first settled in the 1800s. Then he built a barn, then a house, and a church, and before he knew it, he'd recreated buildings from pretty much everywhere in New Denmark. And if you take a look past the exteriors and peek inside a window or a door, you can't help but notice the details Peterson's put into each home. He built every table, dresser, and chair on his own and made sure to include miniatures of what made each place special to him. And some homes hide the photos of those who once lived there. In Peterson's version of the New Denmark Seniors Complex where he lives, he's placed photos of all the original residents, including his late wife. And in his favorite building, his parents' home, something special.
Can you see it from your side there?
I can.
Yeah.
I can
okay.
see your mom and your dad.
That was my parents, yeah.
Peterson's actually outlived many of the original landmarks lost to fire, decay, or demolition. The home he moved into when he immigrated to Canada in 1928 when he was 5 years old is gone. Well, the potato warehouses and barns he's recreated have been torn down as well. But here they still stand, a kind of 3D snapshot in time of New Denmark. Even though he's 100 now, Peterson says he's got plenty of ideas for future projects.
I guess it's a good pastime instead of sitting retired looking out the window.
Oh, that was cool. That was Shane Fowler's story out of New Brunswick. 100 years young indeed. All right, that does it for us tonight. And a reminder, if you've been following the Queen's coverage, which I'm sure many of us have been, and you want to watch her funeral, CBC will have full coverage on Monday morning. It's 3 a.m. Pacific time. Yes, it is because we're adjusting to London time, so it will be in the middle of the night for us. So 3 a.m. Monday morning, we will have full coverage of the Queen's funeral. And of course, if you can't make it then, we will have more coverage that night, 6 p.m. here on CBC Television. And that is your newscast for this evening. Isabelle Regem will be in the chair tonight at 11 p.m. after the National. Have a good weekend.